Hey everyone, Kyle Yates here of the FantasyPros Football Podcast. Thanks for joining us. As always, you can find our brand new content every week at youtube.com/fantasypros, as well as on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow while you're there. Let's get right to it because today I'm taking a look at my top 5 rookies to avoid in redraft leagues for 2021. Can we all take a moment and acknowledge something about ourselves? We tend to get a little bit carried away sometimes with how much we love incoming rookies into the NFL. While we can see some players like Justin Jefferson emerge and truly shatter expectations right out of the gates, the majority of these players are going to need some time before they become viable weekly fantasy options. In this video, I'm going to highlight 5 rookies that I believe we need to be tempering expectations for in 2021 from a fantasy football perspective. Number 5, Elijah Moore, wide receiver, New York Jets. While Elijah Moore was further down my pre-draft rankings, I do believe he has the chance to be special for fantasy football. However, we might just have to wait a little bit before we can find the targets necessary for him to reach that status. In this offense, Corey Davis, Keelan Cole, and Jamison Crowder are all above him on the depth chart. With Crowder restructuring his contract to stay on this team, he's going to have a guaranteed role as a veteran wideout. We might see Moore take on an expanded role in the slot if Crowder misses time with an injury this season, but that's never something I want to bank on when drafting a player. I want to have players on my roster that have a very good chance of returning value right away. If they don't, I can easily move on from them and pick up the next hot waiver wire ad. Drafting Moore in your redraft league is simply locking him onto your roster until something above him changes on the depth chart, and that's not a winning strategy for fantasy football. Keep an eye out for him on your waiver wire, but I don't recommend drafting him unless something changes in training camp or the preseason. Number 4, Terrace Marshall Jr., wide receiver, Carolina Panthers. Marshall's a boomer bust prospect that was most likely going to need some time to develop in the NFL regardless. Now, he ends up in a great situation for him to learn in Carolina, but he's going to be battling for targets in this offense. Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, and DJ Moore are all entrenched above him as target leaders. Is there enough left over for Marshall to have weekly fantasy viability? With his need for development plus the volume concerns, Marshall's someone that's probably best left on the waiver wire. Number 3, Rondale Moore, wide receiver, Arizona Cardinals. Moore's an exciting and dynamic playmaker that should make some splash plays in the preseason that could have everyone clamoring to draft the rookie wideout. However, we need to exercise caution with Moore, particularly due to the offense that he's in. We know that DeAndre Hopkins is going to see a massive target workload here in Arizona, and then there are several other options that are going to be fighting for targets. With Christian Kirk, AJ Green, Chase Edmonds, James Conner, and Andy Isabella all fighting for the leftovers here, it's going to be very difficult to predict which of these players is going to be relevant any given week. Moore might be a good target for best ball drafts, but in a normal redraft league, I'm willing to let someone else deal with the volatility. Number 2, Zack Wilson, quarterback, New York Jets. Wilson was drafted number 2 overall to the New York Jets, which could lead the casual fantasy manager to assume that he's going to be a viable fantasy option right out of the gates. While the future is bright for Wilson from a fantasy perspective, he's going to need some time to develop before we can get to the point of plugging him into our starting lineups as anything more than a streaming option. It's probably best to leave Wilson on your waiver wire in 1 QB leagues and look elsewhere. Number 1, Cadarius Toney, wide receiver, New York Giants. Toney's an exciting player that could break off a few big plays during the preseason, but this offense is simply too crowded for him to return weekly fantasy production. With players like Saquon Barkley, Kenny Golladay, Darius Slayton, Evan Ingram, Kyle Rudolph, Sterling Shepard, and Devontae Booker all vying for targets, it's difficult to see how Toney can rise above the pack and carve out a reliable role. He'll put together some big performances this year, but trying to predict when they'll happen isn't worth rostering him in your leagues. Thank you so much for watching. Are you going to be avoiding these rookies in 2021? Or are you going to take a chance on one of these guys late in your draft? Let us know in the comments section below, and while you're there, hit the like and subscribe buttons so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.